Soy Raphael Ravet de Myocene. Os voy a presentar el dispositivo Myocene que permite medir de manera objetiva la fatiga muscular. Segunda parte de la exponencia estará João con nosotros para compartir su propia experiencia en el Club de Braga con el dispositivo Myocene. So let's switch in English now. Let's also check some basic aspect of human muscle fatigue that, of course, everybody knows, but sometimes it's good to remind. In muscle fatigue, we distinguish there are two components, central aspect and peripheral aspects. In the peripheral fatigue, we distinguish the short-term fatigue and the long-lasting fatigue. With Myocene, we focus on the long-term fatigue, on peripheral fatigue. We don't address the central aspect. Short-term fatigue is related with the metabolic balance, and as its name says, you get rid of it after a couple of hours after restoring the metabolic balance. However, the long-term fatigue related with the impaired calcium release can last till several days. So we easily understand why it's so important to measure a substate of fatigue, which can last till several days with athletes who used to train almost on a daily basis. So again, Myocene, we focus on long-term fatigue measurement. Basic scientific rationale again on how to measure this long-lasting fatigue. We have here the temporal summation curve being the relationship between the nerve impulse firing the motor units and the force of the muscle. We have here in blue the relationship between the impulse and the force of the rested muscles. More we increase the frequency of the nerve impulse firing the motor unit, more we increase the force. After physical exercise, there is a move on the right of the values. And we see we have here the temporal summation curve in red of the muscle with fatigue. What we can observe is that if we fix the frequency of the nerve impulse, there is less force developed by the muscle with fatigue compared to the same muscle rested. Okay? So fatigue is less of force, less of speed, but we could also describe the fatigue by being less force for the same frequency of nerve impulse. Second thing important to observe is that at low frequency, so we're talking between 10 to 20 Hz, the difference in force is greater at low frequencies compared to high frequencies. We observe here there is a much greater drop in force at low frequency compared to high frequency. So how can we measure this fatigue index? By measuring the ratio between the force at low frequency divided by the force at high frequency. So we have here the fatigue index being the relationship between a force at low frequency divided by a force at high frequency. This value is the baseline value. This value won't change unless the athlete trains. Remember, when the athlete trains, there is a move on the right of the value. There is a significant decrease of the force at low frequency. So when we repeat this ratio after physical exercise, which induces fatigue, this value is significantly affected. So the index drops accordingly. Those values, so baseline value and value after training with fatigue, are called the power index. That's how we call this index. Let's have a look now at the Myocene technology. We developed a device to measure the fatigue specifically of the quadriceps. Why the quads? Because it's one of the key muscles for performance, for jumping, for kicking, for accelerating, decelerating. So we really target the quads. We developed a device to be used on the field with athletes and coaches. Okay? It's not a device complicated for research, but really to be used on the field. So the measurement of the fatigue index, it's easy to do. The athlete just sits on the device. Okay? It's fast because it just lasts 2 minutes per leg, okay, which is roughly 5 minutes per athlete. By the way, the athlete can do that by himself, alone. He doesn't need to have someone helping him. The device is transportable. It's quite light, and you can easily move it from the pitch to also while traveling with the athlete. But the real game changer in this technology is that the fatigue index calculation doesn't request any voluntary movement or maximum force or whatever from the athlete. The athlete is totally passive. So the fatigue index is not variated based on subjective perception or the willingness of the athlete to perform a performance. In this case, the athlete is totally passive. So let's have a look at the device. There are 3 main pillars in the Myocene technology: a neurostimulator, a sensor, and an algorithm. Basically, the neurostimulator will generate electro-induced contraction of the quad. at low and high frequencies, okay, with several parameters. The sensor will register the force induced by those electroinduced contraction, send those values to the algorithm, which calculate the index, okay? All this in just 2 minutes per leg. So let me give you a quick example on how the device works before to leave the floor to João, who is going to share his own experience. We have here, this is extract from the Myocene software. So what you can see on the screen, we have here the left leg in blue and the right leg in orange. The power dex, it's a value which is between 50 to 90. Okay? It can be different from one leg to another, as we see here in the example. Okay? And we do not compare those values in between athletes. Okay? This is personal and is related to physiological aspects. So before the training, this athlete, he has a power dex value of 68 and 72 at rest with no fatigue. After the physical exercise, after the training, so he started at almost 4, he's 2 hours later, we calculate again the fatigue index, and we observe that there is a drop in the values because he dropped from 72 to 65 and 78 from 67. I cannot see very well from here. And we can see on the graph easily that there is a drop of the values, and we can also even observe that the left leg is dropping more in terms of fatigue than the right leg. This used to happen. Sometimes there is an imbalance in the capacity to resist to fatigue. So this is basically what you can obtain by doing just a measurement before training and a measurement after training. Now I'm going to leave João explain his own experience with the device and explain 2 protocols. First thing he wanted to double check is that is Myocene sensitive to match load? And what about the time course of recovery? And then the use of Myocene in a congested period at match day +1.
Okay, thank you, Raphael. So I'm going to present quick some examples. So, okay, our first concern was this. We know that the traditional tests are very difficult to apply in practice. We have counter-movement jump or maximum voluntary contractions that we know that the players, normally player buy-in is not so high. They can be a bit invasive, especially when we want to test after the match, because sometimes the output of the match, the final result also influence the motivation of the athletes. So what we like in Myocene was exactly that, as Raphael already said. We don't need, we are not dependent on the motivation of the subject to test fatigue. And that was something new for us, and we wanted to test. So as we had no reference, this is a quite new device, our first concern was to analyze the sensitivity of Myocene to the match load. Is this device sensitive enough to obtain real values from the match? And to understand the magnitude of these values, as Raphael said, okay, we have a drop of 4 or 3 points. Is this enough to make any decision? So we wanted to understand that. And after this step, we wanted to analyze the Myocene protocol specifically in congested periods, because it makes sense to do it to test fatigue in these congested periods to know if the players recovered enough to participate in the next coming training sessions. And we wanted to do it in match day +1 because we use other measures, so we don't want the players to be in test all the days or at the same time with different measures. So we want to test fatigue as soon as possible in match day +2, and then we can complement these tests with other biometrical data or biomarkers in the match day +2. And this was done to decide if in congested periods the players are able to participate in the match training session +2. That is very important in congested periods. Okay, so what we have here is something that we are still doing, is in fact is part of the Sandor thesis. We are trying to validate the system. And so we analyze the pre-value after the match. And then we analyze, I don't know if here, 30 minutes after the match, and we can see a slight decrease in this example. And then 24 hours, okay, he almost recovered in 24 hours. And then we analyze 48 hours after the match, and we can see that the Myocene was sensitive to the load. There was a slight decrease, almost 3 points in each leg. and the athlete was completely recovered after 48 hours. We have another example here. Pre-match value, again, post-match value, 30 minutes after the match, and then in this case we missed the 24 hours analysis, and we have again the 48 hours. We can see that again the Myocene was sensitive to the load. The decrease was much higher, okay, and we can see a slightly fatigue still in the right leg. Okay, so for us, what we assume is that, okay, as the magnitude of decrease in Myocene increases, maybe we cannot have a complete recovery at match day +2, for instance. So it depends on the magnitude of decrease in the match. So here we have the examples. Now in the first team, we have to assess the pre-value. Okay, you know, it's difficult to assess the pre-value after the match, so we use the pre-season to do that. We have made several tests to assess a value that we assume that is without fatigue. So baseline to compare, and then after a match, 24 hours after the match, and we can see that the player was able to complete recover. But in the other match, we see that the player did not recover. So in this case, our intervention was, we can assume that this is because of the match load that was much higher in this game than the other one, but it's just an assumption, okay? Several factors influence fatigue. But for us, our decision is, okay, in the first game, we have the player ready to participate in the training session of match day +2 with the team, but in the other game, in the second game, maybe is not ready to participate in the training session, so we need to increase or to enhance the recovery modalities. Here we have another example, a different one. The pre-value, you can see that the pre-value was obtained not after the match, but in match day +2, which was the highest value that we obtained in this athlete. And then we can see after the first match, he was able to recover in the left leg, almost, but he did not recover in the right leg. And the same happened 4 days after this match, okay, the same pattern. So here we try to discover what happened. He didn't have a previous injury that explained this, but it happened, so he was not able to participate in match training session +2. And we enhanced the recovery modalities, and of course we need to do something, maybe play an intervention to increase the fatigue resistance of the right leg, but of course we cannot do it in the congested period. We will do it in the next uncongested period. Okay, and that's it. Those were the examples.
Yeah. That's all. Okay. Thank you. We try to respect the timing. I think we did it. If you want to discuss later on, I will be at the booth, and with pleasure we can continue the discussions. Thank you very much.